to 2023 Halcyon Careers Day, and I am so grateful to introduce to you one of our Halcyon parents, who is an accomplished musician, songwriter, music producer, filmmaker. I think the list kind of goes on and on. You're also an author.
Author too.
Yeah, and also an author.
Too, yeah.
So this is Toby Gadd, and I'd like you to give him a warm Halcyon welcome.
Hello, and I think I would like to start with a short video that kind of sums up some of the work. Recently, I've been a judge on German Idol, and I made a little video clip of the best moments, so I'm going to start with that. If it works.
Top producer Toby Gadd.
Mach mal. Super. Bei dir erleben wir eine wahre Heldenreise. Wir suchen ja Originale. Und wenn man so jemand wie Michael Jackson Zeile für Zeile nachsingt, dann hat man vielleicht eine Kopie. Aber du tust deine eigene Persönlichkeit da rein. Wie du das singst, Gänsehaut. Also für mich Wahnsinn.
How are you?
Amazing.
Welcome. Well, I knew Toby's reputation as a writer. He had hit songs.
One of the lines we hit on was all of me loves all of you.
Yeah, you came with that line, and then I thought, oh my God, I feel the same for my wife.
Yes, once we had that, we built around that.
Loving you. Also meine Schuhe passen zu deinen Hosen, glaube ich. Ich wollte noch sagen, also diesem Lied als You Somebody Sing kam diese Zeile, da dachte er schreibt darüber, dass er als Tough Guy auch mal zeigen muss, dass er sensibel sein kann und dass er auch mal zerbrechlich ist, dass er auch mal warmherzig ist, weil nicht nur Tough Rockstar ist. Und das zeigst du hättest es nicht besser machen können, das war sehr, sehr gut. Danke dir. Vielen Dank, Tobi.
When I first heard it, the Toby Gadd didn't think I would really be into it. And I said, that is the most incredible song I've heard all year. I have to sing it.
For me, coming from a show like that, I would take his opinions really seriously.
Weil ich Musik mache, das ist auch oft so emotional, weil es nicht so bewegt. Das ist was Spirituelles, wenn man da rankommt dann.
Song they wrote in a room with Toby Gadd and Marcella.
Hast du das gerade jetzt entschieden oder war das so über die Tage hinweg jetzt eine Entscheidung?
Ich war nicht zufrieden mit mir, ich habe mir zu viel Druck in meinem Kopf gemacht, ich kann es nicht mehr.
Das habe ich bei vielen Künstlern erlebt, mit denen ich gearbeitet habe. Gerade bevor man da diesen Durchbruch hat, ist es am härtesten und am schwersten. Wenn du singst, da ist so viel Seele dabei und so viel Ehrlichkeit. Ich würde dich auch sehr gerne hoffentlich in den Live-Shows sehen.
Dankeschön, das bedeutet mir sehr viel.
Das ist echt magisch.
And so on. I'll stop it here.
So that German Idol clip, it covers a lot of territory, and I think we get a sense of your personality and your music career. And what I want to do is take you back to Munich, where you grew up, and you were Danish, and you grew up in Munich, and you shared with me that you were somebody who had crazy dreams, and that you had to hold on to those crazy dreams throughout your life. But what I'm curious about is, what took you from that crazy dream in Munich to working with people like Beyonce and John Legend and Madonna, some of the most important people in the music and cultural world today?
One moment, I'm going to show some pictures. Can you see the picture? Okay. I'm going to just a quick run through how it all started. This is my parents' jazz band, and let's see, this is my brother and me, and at the piano it was all about music at this time. My parents had a jazz band, and they would play once or twice a week in different clubs. And my brother and me, a little older then, discovered, oh, if we write our own songs, if we take over their instruments after their rehearsals and pretend to be them, maybe we can play in their intermissions and also entertain like them. And that's how it started. We started writing our songs, playing in their intermissions, and when my parents went back on stage, we went through the audience and said, we're collecting for us, do you have some money? And that was our first pocket money. So let's see, this is a few years later, our first television show on German television. That's a second television show, and that's it for these photos. Well, my brother and me, we kept writing songs, we kept dreaming the big dream, and I think when I was 15, we had our first record on a guy named Peter Schilling. He had a hit called Major Tom. I don't know if you know that one. We had a B-side of one of these songs. A few years later, I think I was maybe 19, we had given our songs to someone who gave it to Frank Farian, who just had a hit with Milli Vanilli with Girl You Know It's True. And you might know that name, Milli Vanilli. It's made it into the dictionary for faking it, for not really singing, pretending. And these guys, they just happened, they were two dancers from Munich, and Frank Farian at the time had a song that he loved, Girl You Know It's True, and he put these dancers on the song, and just for the fun of it, released a single, and it became a massive hit worldwide. And very quickly, he needed an album, so this was our chance to contribute 3 songs to that album. And that was the first time that we realized, like a week after we recorded those 3 songs, the album was in the charts and entered at #1, and soon after they were doing stadiums with 70,000 people in America, and it just blew out of proportion. And a year later, they got the Grammy, and at that time, people kind of realized that this wasn't real, and sometimes the tapes jammed. Back in the days, it was tapes when they performed. And people realized they really didn't sing. And truthfully, they didn't sing a word on their record. And then Frank Farian gave the Grammy back, and that whole thing made history. It was just such a bad scandal. But for my brother and me, this was, we didn't know at the time that they didn't sing, and it was still an incredible experience to realize that with 3 songs that you write in a pretty short amount of time, you can make a lot of money. And it was kind of the start for me to, this was going to be my career, to write songs. And then maybe fast forward 10 years, I was in Germany for 10 years, I dreamt of going to America. I knew that I needed to go to an English-speaking territory. It was going to be England or America, and it took me a long time to finally make that step and have enough money saved that I could actually leave everything behind in Germany and start over. In those 10 years, from my 20s to my 30s in Germany, I had minor successes, little records here and there, but nothing major. Dabbled a little bit in film score music. But then my big dream was really to write a song that moves the world, similar to what I observed with Milli Vanilli. And I kind of realized this can only happen if you're either in England or in America. So when I was 30, I finally made the move to America. And maybe I'll show a few photos from then. Let's see, just a moment. Bear with me. So this was America 20 years ago. Okay, back in the day, we didn't have cell phones, so everything you would look for was on a pin board like this one. So I came to New York, I was looking for a studio place, I had saved some money, and it was all these little flyers where you would have to call somebody and then visit the places. There's some photos from New York, Brooklyn at the time. And we also didn't have maps on our phones, so these were real maps, and I covered all this ground looking for a place where I could put my studio and start over. The rats in the New York subway, they were everywhere. New York's cleaned up quite a lot. World Trade Centers were still there. And winters are brutal in New York. And this was my first room. So I shared I found a little space in Midtown Manhattan, 46th Street, and I shared it with a jewelry designer. And he used the place from 7 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. And I would come in at 4 in the afternoon until 7 in the morning and write songs there. And so I became a complete night owl. But Manhattan at night is beautiful. And city never sleeps. And I had the whole street was kind of magical and empty at night, and I had these speakers, I could make them as loud as possible, and you would open the windows, you would hear it through the whole street. It was great at night, I loved it. So that's where I started living my big dream of starting in America. I was 30 years old, and didn't quite know where to start. I put little flyers on the traffic signs saying, "Are you a singer? Do you want to work with a new producer out of Europe?" And went to open mic clubs where you can just write your name on a list and sing a song in the evening and hopefully get heard. And that's how I found my first artists and my first collaborators, and wrote a bunch of songs. Found one artist who was 16 years old, Shanta, and wrote 10 songs with her, thinking, oh, I'm going to do an album now, and found an attorney who would then open the doors to record labels. I went to all the record labels and said, this is the next big thing, and played them those songs. And soon after, I realized we had 100% rejection. They hated the music. It was terrible. But now I had my door in the record companies. I knew these people. I'd seen them. And I knew that if I would have the right song, I could come back. And I think it was maybe a year later, I had the chance to write with a girl who just left a girl group called The Wild Orchid. Her name was Fergie. And we wrote a song quickly. She came into the writing session in tears and had just broken up with her boyfriend, just got out of rehab, and had to get her life together, had to get focused, get clarity, get centered in her life. So we wrote a quick song in an hour, and that was it. Didn't really think about the song much more for the next few years. She didn't do a record like we were hoping. She actually joined a group, the Black Eyed Peas. And then 3 albums later, she finally had her chance to release her own album. And my song almost didn't make it on the record. In the end, it made it on the record, and it became not her first, second, third. It became her 4th single. But it was the biggest song of her career. And for me, that song, that was 2007, that opened all the doors. From that point on, people knew me by a song. And my big dream was, of course, now I want to work with the biggest. So I thought of Beyoncé, and I ran in the doors at her management company, her publishing company, her label. Anyone who would know her, I said, I must work with her. And a year later, I got a phone call saying that she wants to work with me too. And that was incredible. I went to New York to Jay-Z's studio, and 5 days. First day she didn't show up. Second day she didn't show up. Third day she came in, played me a few of her demos. One of them was Single Ladies. I had the privilege of listening to that song before it came out. That was incredible. And then the next day, I played her a few songs that I had written, and one of them was If I Were a Boy, and I had just written it with a new artist. And she jumped up and said, Toby, you won't believe this, but I want to sing this song right now. So I recorded her, and it was amazing. Incredible experience. What a professional. And that song, it just entered at #1 and was a big record. And all this time I had also tried to work with John Legend, but John would never want to work with me because he was very neo-soul and I was very pop, and I wasn't cool at the time. It took years before John would consider having a session with me, and eventually we got in the room 2013 and wrote a song for the love of his life, and they weren't engaged yet, but he wanted to write a song for her. And he had the idea, all of me loves all of you, and then we traded places on the piano and going line by line and answered each other's lines, and I think an hour later we had the song. It was pretty fast, and that song, again, kind of changed both our lives. That was John's biggest song, and it was my biggest song. Should I maybe, to wrap this up, maybe play a few moments that were big moments in my, like keystones in my career. And then we can go to the questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. This was one very big moment for me. That was the Grammys, and I didn't think she was going to do my song. I thought she was going to do Halo, because that was the song that was nominated. And up to this point, I was sitting in the audience and was almost a little disappointed that If I Were a Boy wasn't even mentioned at the Grammys. And then she starts singing, and I was like, oh my God, it's my song.
Beautiful.
And so on. That went 6 minutes, so she did a medley, and I was like, for 6 minutes, I couldn't believe.
Wow.
That was really
Great surprise.
one of the very, very big moments in my life. And another big moment was...
You gonna do that song?
Oh yeah, I have to do it.
Yeah.
We talked it up now.
You gonna do that song? Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
That was before the song was famous. Oprah had John and Chrissy as guests, and then he just played the song to both of them.
It's always so moving, always moving emotionally whenever I hear it.
That song had the second slowest climb in history of Billboard to #1. It took 6 months. That's that. All right, well, then we could...
Yeah, so you mentioned record labels and, you know, the singers themselves, but there are many other careers involved in the business that you're a part of. So can you talk a little bit about some of the other opportunities that exist within the industry, including maybe some people who've worked as your assistants?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is, if you're an artist and you want to pursue a career, that is one thing. You could be a singer, you could be a producer, you could be someone who's on the creative side, but then there's a lot of jobs that are not on the creative side. Record labels, publishing companies, the legal department, the promotion, and I'm dealing, like, for the most part of my career, some of it was the creative part, but a lot of it was promoting myself and going to the record companies. I would, the major record companies in Los Angeles, in New York, in London, I would visit them 2 or 3 times a year, and within each record company they have A&Rs, artist and repertoire. Those are guys who look out for the artists and help them choose their songs, help them make the productions great. And so that's, within record companies, that would be the creative part, where if you were to seek a career path in a record label and you wanted to be somewhat part in the creative bit, you would want to become an A&R. It's highly competitive and not always the funnest. And also in the music industry, there's no rules. It's the Wild West. It's the land grab. It's everyone wants to take credit for everything that happens. And if people believe them, they get promoted to the next level. But A&Rs are the people that I'm a songwriter and producer. And as a songwriter and producer, we talk to the A&Rs at the record companies and try to make them like our songs, and then play them to the artists, and hopefully get those songs on the record, or ask the A&Rs if we can have writing sessions with their latest signings or with their famous artists. And that's still what I'm doing today. I'm here in London for 6 months because our child May decided she wants to be in London and go to school in London. She thought that was way cooler than being in Los Angeles. So we thought it was a fun idea. Let's do 6 months in London, and here we are. So the first thing I did coming to London was to go to all the major record labels and sit down with all the A&Rs and play them my latest songs and hope that I get to write with their big artists, but also with the artists they are most excited about, whoever they just signed. So recently I worked with Celeste. It's an artist that I like very much. She's has a bit of a jazz vibe. Were a number of artists, upcoming artists that I love, that I worked with. I worked with James Arthur quite a bit, maybe you know him. So yesterday I worked with an artist, he just has a song on the radio called Messy in Heaven. Her name's Wendy, I don't know if you know her, but that was a fun session, she's very young. So A&Rs are kind of our counterparts for songwriters and producers. Then, of course, within record labels, you have a lot of other, like the legal department, you have the promotion department, and so on. And then there are the publishers. So the record labels, they are on the recorded music side. The publishers, they are on the creative, on the writing side. Like if you write a song, you have a copyright. Like that song that you wrote it, it's your copyright. And that song could be recorded by many different artists. And every time it's recorded, their record company owns that recording. But you, with the publishing company, own that copyright. And that copyright could be copied many, many times. And that's, for most part, the more valuable part than the recording. Because like now, Big Girls Don't Cry, I wrote it 20 years ago, and it's just getting re-recorded now by a German group. And every 20 years, some songs come back, and then you build a catalog that becomes more and more valuable with time. And if you write songs that hopefully become evergreens, then your catalog becomes very valuable. And that's what the publishers hold. So within the publishing company, you also have A&Rs who deal with the artists and the repertoire and try to get those songs cut and recorded over and over. Then you have the sync department. Those are the people in the publishing company that play the songs to movies, to commercials, to television, and try to get those songs placed as much as possible. It's very important, the sync department. And if you have a hit song, just one sync, let's say you get it onto a Coca-Cola advertisement, your song, it could be $250,000, $500,000 just for this one opportunity to have your song connected with that brand. So there's a lot of money in sync. And then, of course, the licensing, the royalty department, those are number crunchers. Those are people who are very good with mathematics. And they are important because they make sure the money comes in, and so on. So that's publishing companies, record labels. Then, of course, there's the whole music law department, lawyers. I have lawyers that whenever I release a record, the lawyers have to make a deal with the record company. And music law is a big field. And then there's management. Management, a lot of managers are former lawyers because it's a good background for a manager to actually know what's inside the contracts. And the managers, they speak for you. They go out in the music world and talk to the publishers, to the artists, to other managers, to the labels, and they try to get you opportunities so you can write songs and produce. And once you have a record, they will stand up for you and tell the record label, hey, his work is valuable, you gotta pay him this much money for it. And then the lawyers come in and they make the contracts. And then, as far as jobs, I could talk about over the last years. I would say my career pretty much started when I came to America. A couple of years into that, maybe 3 years after I came to America, my real music career started. And I started having assistants. Should have had that much earlier, but eventually I started having assistants. So people like yourself, young people who are curious about the music industry, who want to learn and who would be in the studio with me and keep the ship afloat and make sure all those little things are taken care of. And that could be as small as taking the trash out, but sometimes talking to the major record companies and talking to the major labels. And it's a lot of communication. And for assistants to come in, this is something I can highly recommend. If you have an opportunity to be an assistant of someone who might have the career path that you dream of. You could learn so much about their daily routines, about their lives, what it takes, and so on. I had probably 9 or 10 assistants in the last 25 years. Usually 2 to 4 years into it, assistants want to leave, they want to go somewhere else. So we usually, the first half year with an assistant is getting to know each other, getting good at things. The first year, then the second year, they are indispensable and they know everybody you know and they speak for you, and they're very important, and it's almost like a family relationship or like a marriage in a way. And then the third year, you kind of feel, okay, they want to move on, upward mobility, and an assistant job can only offer so much. So eventually, that one has to part ways. I had 2 assistants that were really special. One, his name is Jack. He was recommended from a neighbor, actually, which was really odd, because usually when we look for an assistant, we put a classified ad out and get maybe 300-400 replies, because in Los Angeles, everybody wants to be in the music business. And then we start looking through their resumes and maybe interviewing 30, 40, 50 of them, and then doing a second round of interviews. And I had this habit of the last 3 potential assistants, I would take hikes with them, because that's when you really get to know somebody. Hike up a mountain together and do something that has nothing to do with music, and then you learn more about them than you could in any other conversation. But Jack made it through all this process just by one recommendation from a neighbor, and we did some Zoom calls. That was during the pandemic. And he really, he was, I would say, by far the best assistant I ever had, because at some point, he was asking if he could look into one of my contracts, and like a record contract for a song that came out. And I gave him access to the contract. He read through it that same evening, and then he said, can I check the other contracts too? And then he started, just for the fun of it, reading all my contracts. Those are like 50 to 60 to 70 page documents, and it's all legal speak. And I don't even enjoy, I haven't read through many of them in years. And at first I did, which I recommend, read your own contracts, but eventually they become repetitive. I've maybe had 400 or 500 songs released. Every song requires contracts, so it wears out. But he had a lot of fun reading through all these contracts, and eventually, a few weeks later, he said, there's a flaw, there's something wrong here, and next contract, there's something wrong here. And he asked me, can I maybe talk to the labels, the publishers, the royalty collection societies, and find out if there really is a flaw or if I'm wrong? And I said, yeah, please go for it. And long story short, a few months later, he actually found $250,000 in uncollected royalties because he went through those contracts. And many of these contracts weren't ever finished or negotiated all the way or so, because in the music industry, you have a record release, everyone's excited, the contract always comes last. Sometimes it gets signed half a year later, sometimes it never gets signed. And so he found all this money, and that was incredible for someone. He was 20 years old at the time, and just a real self-starter. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, what it takes in this industry. If you're a self-starter, if you can find your own job within a position, if you can make yourself needed and useful, and you don't just do what you're told or what's required, but beyond that, you see, wow, what else could I do? How could I bring value into this situation? And he blew us all away, this guy. And now he's at Warner Brothers and negotiating confidential. Another one of the assistants that is very memorable is Josh Camby. Josh Camby, he was very much by the book at the beginning, and always wanted to be an artist. And that was for me a no. Like, I didn't want assistants who want to be singers or artists. I kind of said, I'm not looking for that. I wouldn't want that. But he didn't then mention it anymore. I knew he had his videos on YouTube, and his dream was to be a singer. But then for the first two, 3 years, he never mentioned it. and was just a very good assistant. Everything was by the book and great, but then eventually he asked, could I remix one of your songs? And then 2 years into it, I said, okay, try it. And it was good. And then the third year, we decided that we'd change this assistantship into half the time assistant, half the time we are going to be his publisher and promote him as a songwriter, producer, singer. And then a year later, we had a session with Armin van Buuren, and he's a Dutch DJ, in case you don't know. And he, that song that we did kind of put Josh on the map as a singer. It's called Sunny Days, and it was a platinum record there, and launched his career. And then for a few more years, he worked out of one of my studios, and it was great to have him. And eventually, he recouped his deal, and we let him go. And he's now a songwriter, producer in his own right, and doing great. So that's just a little roundup of jobs that kind of I can think of. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask for a time check. 9:40, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Oh my God, that went fast.
Well,
You had all these questions.
so that's okay. So I think I want to ask you about your documentary filmmaking.
All right.
We can move away from music for a bit.
Yes. Maybe I start. 2015 was the pinnacle of my career, the craziest year ever. I had All of Me #1 in the whole world, and I was in the studio with Madonna and Diplo and did the whole album with her in 5 weeks, and at the same time was doing Leona Lewis's album, all the songs, and love Leona to pieces. It was such a great relationship. And my dream suddenly was to not work, and I looked at my calendar, and the next months they were all planned out, every day, 2-3 sessions, non-stop. And I kind of made this very tough decision to miss out on everything and tell the record companies that I'm not writing songs anymore. Because everything was too much. I had done it for years and years and years, and it takes so much of you to always create things. So I took the choice to become a surfer, a drifter, take care of my kids, do some house renovations, and travel more. And one place I had visited in 1997 by coincidence was in Indonesia, Borneo. There was a place that has orangutans in their natural habitat. And we kind of stumbled into it at the time back then, but it was unforgettable. And we got to interact with orangutans in their world. And it was just an experience I could never forget, and I kept telling everyone about it. So 2016, I thought I really want to go back there and bring my kids. And so we went back to Borneo, and my older daughter, Melody, she was so taken by the experience that she stayed for 6 months and helped with rehabilitation of orangutans. And during that time, I went back a few more times to visit her, and I thought, everyone knows Jane Goodall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah? So Jane Goodall is a very famous primatologist, and you might know Dian Fossey.
Yes.
So Jane Goodall studied the chimpanzees, Dian Fossey studied the mountain gorillas, and Birute studied the orangutans, but Birute is largely forgotten. Nobody knows her name. And she was there in 1997 when I was there for the first time, and she was still there when we came to visit. She has spent 50 years in the rainforest. She has raised her kids amongst orangutans, like Mowgli. And it's a fascinating story. At the time, that movie of Jane Goodall was out in the theaters, and I thought, why does nobody know Birute anymore? She was one of the 3 original primates, they said. And in the 70s, she actually became very famous. She was on a lot of TV shows. She was on the cover of National Geographic. So I thought, if no one tells her story, maybe I learn filmmaking and tell her story. And as a songwriter, it's always about the story. I feel if I know a good story, if I know something that you say it once and people keep thinking about it and tell their friends, like a story that can go viral. I felt I had this amazing story about her life, and I just had to learn how to make films, and went to cinematographers, asked them, how do you hold a camera and all that. And so went to Borneo several times. All in all, I went 8 times. And just recently, I went the 9th time. And started first documenting everything she has there, 250 employees, a big organization that protects the last big stronghold of the species. Tanjung Puting National Park holds about 6,000 orangutans. And it's mind-blowing if you go there. There's these camps throughout the national park where just wooden little shacks, and you wake up in the morning and the orangutans knock on your door, and it's like a Garden of Eden. You have gibbons, you have all kinds of wildlife. And I felt the real urge, I want to protect these places. I want to do my part in helping that not everything gets clear-cut and turned into palm oil plantations, which most of it has at this point. So this film now is actually coming to life, and let me see if I can see it. I'm going to show you a trailer of the film.
I grew to love him as though he was my own flesh and blood. I was pregnant. The intensity of Bintu's identification with suburban playmates and the accuracy of his imitations were amazing, but also alarming. I didn't want him to become one. BT took to go to classes. As an anthropologist, she spent most of her time alongside her about the study of vegetation.
Bad angulas, but just bring it down under wraps.
Bintu leaving was heart-wrenching. He's fully united with my work. He says to me, if it wasn't for your children, I would kill you. I vowed that the next time I would not just observe. If a wild orangutan needed help, I would spring to action, no matter what the cost.
Has she proven to be one of those crazy people like you and Diane?
I think she's even crazy. I mean, she's still there and she's got the most terrible problems to overcome.
They are our relatives. They are our kin.
The world knows about orangutans. My name is Felix Feldman.
Of course I'm afraid. It's terrifying. If you allow that to get to you, you can't continue the work.
I love the line that ends that clip about fear. So is there anything that you can say about fear and how you handle fear in relation to some of the risks that you've taken in your life?
Sometimes the fear of failure it's kind of what kept me in New York, because it was easy to go back when I came to New York first, I ran out of money. I couldn't pay the rent. I was living on instant soup for a couple of months. And I was more afraid of failing and going back to Germany and giving up on my big dream. And it was just, I was holding on to this dream so much that I couldn't make it with music. And I guess sometimes the hope is bigger than the fear.
Oh, that's beautiful, yeah. It's interesting because you said in the German Idol clip, you were giving one of the participants some, sharing some wisdom or experience when he was expressing he was about to give up. It was too much. And you said that often happens right before the breakthrough?
That's been the experience throughout my career, that I always want everything now, and a lot of things have happened more than I could have ever dreamt in my life, but it always took a lot longer than I thought. And it's really, the perseverance is probably one of the most important things in your life, that if you want something, don't get discouraged just because it doesn't happen today or tomorrow or next year. Sometimes if you dream it and you really feel this is for you and you think you have what it takes for it, and you hang in there, maybe eventually you'll get there. It's just like grinding away on this dream, telling everyone about it. And still today, I mean, I have songs that I think they are going to be big songs, and I go to every record label and tell them, this is a big song, I want your artists to sing them. And with a lot of my songs, it took years before they came out. I mean, just now I have a single that just came out in Holland last week. It's a song we wrote 7 years ago, and I kept playing this song to everyone, and eventually I found this one DJ, Baker Matt, who loves the song and says, I'm going to release that as a single. And it's all perseverance. Keep going at it and keep telling people this is going to work. This is amazing. And in a way, there are no rules in this music business. It's all crazy dreams. I dream that I have a song that I think has potential, and I go for this dream hard, and just eventually it becomes a reality. A lot of them don't.
In our IB world, we have IB learner traits, and so one of them is balance. You know, we aspire to have balance in our lives. It sounds like it's been hard to come by balance in the field.
Zero balance. It is just pushing, and it takes all of you. And that's why 2015 I had to pull the plug and become a human being again. And it's very intense. Some don't make it, some die. I just watched the Avicii movie, and for him at 26 years old, it was all too much. He took his life. He didn't know how to find balance in his life. And every gig, he knew that in a week he could make over $1 million by just doing a few shows here and there. And it's not all about the money and the fame. It's really about being happy in the end of the day, and knowing that you've been a good human as well, and you've had fun days, you've laughed, you've been loved. That's important.
Thank you. So I would like to open up question and answers from our audience. So do we have any questions? Yes, please. Maya, would you stand, please? And, thank you, project your voice.
Yes. I wanted to ask, you spent so much time in America, and you mentioned that you lived in 6 months. How do you compare the American and, I guess, British music scene?
Mm-hmm.
And do you find it different to work with? Is there a big difference?
Yes. So she asked about the music scene, how it's different in America to England. I feel the British music scene appreciates genreless and timeless music more. I think there is a love for artists like Amy Winehouse, but also a lot of other artists that embrace the old and that aren't the most trendy. And in America, it's very much about the latest TikTok, the latest this, and there isn't an appreciation so much for something that is timeless. And I would say, if there's one thing that sums up my music, it's never been trendy. It's always music that could be there 10 years ago, or hopefully in 10 years from now as well, which was always my goal, to write songs that are not, don't have a timestamp on it. So I feel very welcome in England, and the labels have been super sweet and have trusted me with some of their great talents. So I love it here. And I wish that LA could have a bit more of London. LA is really a mess, and there's none of these beautiful buildings, the tradition, and also I would say sophistication. I think people are more gentle here, and there's a lot of common sense that goes into many aspects of city planning, of just human demeanor, that you find in London that you don't find in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, it's the me first place.
Thank you. That was a great question. And do we have other questions? Other things that you're curious about? Yes, Tim.
Do you find that now the music industry to me seems more saturated than maybe it was 20 years ago because it's easier to sort of make and produce music? Do you find it now that it's harder to sort of cut through and become, let's say, well known because there's so much being released like all the time?
Yes, because of social media, each one of you can release their own record tomorrow. And so there are a lot more records coming out at all times. The record labels are still trying to keep their dominance. 20 years ago, the record labels would decide what comes out. They would decide who goes into a studio to even record something. You couldn't record your own music without $500,000. So they would provide that money and then own all the rights. Now you can, on your laptop, make your own song, put it out tomorrow, and there it is. The labels, when streaming came out, panicked and bought into all the streaming services and own a huge chunk of Spotify and all the streaming services. And the land grab happened there. So through that, the labels are making more money than ever. And yes, a lot of music comes out. The labels still kind of have an idea who comes onto the playlists and onto the featured places. Everything's changing every day. The rules are getting rewritten every day in the music industry, and it's very interesting to watch. But I feel that people like yourself have so much more power today than you would have had 20 years ago.
Leo?
With a lot of publicity on the kind of abuse artists face from record labels time to time, one example I can think of is, I guess, Elvis Presley. The recent movie talked about how his record label and kind of took advantage of him and how his managers took advantage of him. How do you think that kind of that publicity and other artists forming their own labels catering to artists, how has that kind of affected your work?
Yeah, back in the day, the labels had kind of, they were the bottleneck. They could decide what comes out because it took so much money to rent a studio and to do all that. So with Elvis Presley, he couldn't record his own music or release his own vinyls. It was the labels and it was the managers, and they took a lot of, like, there's no rules in the music industry. It's kind of, everything is always negotiable. And they just took as much as they could. Sometimes they took everything. And how it's affected my work? Yes, when I came to America in 2000 and started from scratch, basically, with music, the first 3 years I didn't make any money. I got promised a lot, and I wrote with artists eventually that were signed to record labels. But the A&Rs would always tell me, oh, we're just out of budget, we can't pay your production. And eventually, I found a manager, David Sonnenberg, and the moment I had this manager, I would get paid. Because then you have someone standing up for you. There's no rule that says you should get paid as a producer, but if you have a very loud pitbull manager, then you make sure you get enough money. So, yeah.
Do we have one more question? Tim?
Yeah, sorry for asking two.
That's all right.
I just have a question about something that I've heard. It might be like a rumor about like songwriting credits. There's this rumor that like big artists come into a songwriting session, change one word, and then get put on the credits and have that.
I've heard that too, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? And if that is true, does that like really frustrate you?
It's very true, and it happens all the time that everyone always tries to get a piece of the pie. And with Beyonce, it was kind of ironic because that album was a pop album and she just came out of Destiny's Child. And she had Crazy in Love, that was her first big hit on her own. And then this was going to be her first album, and she announced, I'm going to write every song on my album, which of course she didn't. And my song, If I Were a Boy, was already written, and we just recorded it. And she maybe changed one word or so, but there was no reason to give her any of the writing share. And then a few months later, Matthew Knowles, her dad, calls me and says, my daughter really should have some copyright on there. And I said, I have a manager, I'll speak to my manager. And that was that. And that call happened 3 times. He kept calling. And just a little later, we heard through the grapevine that they already did the video for this song. And at that point, we said, no, Matthew. This was the only song on the album where Beyonce didn't get credit. And they just try to steal credit from everybody. And it is, unfortunately, if you're close to having such an important record with such a, at that time, Beyonce was a mega star. I mean, she still is, but at that time, she ruled radio as well, which she doesn't anymore. And so anyone would give anything to be on that record. And thanks to my manager at the time, he said no.
I think we've come to the end of our time, and I just want to thank you so much for sharing an amazing story and your wisdom with our students here today.
Thank you for having me.